I don't think anybody called him haughty, but he was a little standoffish because he rejected a lot of the social norms that even the black people had, especially black middle-class people who thought that because they had an education, that they were a little better than some of the regular working people. And he took pride in debating them and pulling them down and letting them know that, well, if you didn't have your degree, you couldn't prove to me that you, that you had one. If you didn't show it to me, there's no way I would know it from your intellect, But he was not haughty. He was not haughty, but he was bashful. Robert was, and people find that hard to believe, he was very shy, kind of, he wasn't shy in, I don't know, he was just shy. I don't know how to describe that. He gave the presence of being very strong, but he was more of an introvert. He was a private person. He didn't easily mix into a crowd. He wasn't a loud person. He wasn't a social mixer, so to speak.
I've wondered about that because that whole the poetry thing, is considered so. I mean, not to us now, but maybe for you and me, but in the sense of the day and even now in society, that someone who writes poetry is usually the most masculine. And I thought that meant a certain inwardness.
Yes.
That might be there.
Yeah. He was very private in a way, in his own way. He was a very private person, and really shied away from a lot of social interaction. Loved classical music, listened to it all the time when he was writing or even reading or studying. Yeah. And he loved all kinds of music, but that was. He would listen to classical music when he was real young. And during the first years of our marriage, he was that way. He was very much family-oriented. He was very close to his family. But he was not a real sociable person at the time when we first married. I think I would start by explaining to them what kind of a society I grew up in. I would tell them what I would consider the story of Monroe. The fact that when I was in elementary school and high school, the situation was that we had different communities. We had a black community and a white community. And I lived on one side of town, and white people lived on the other side of town. I would tell them at that time that most of my activities were the vast majority of my activities were in my black community. I had a black minister, I had black schoolmates, and my affiliation or my association with whites was just very limited. And the association that I had with whites was that my parents were very protective, and they tried to teach us to protect ourselves because they were in constant fear that we would run afoul of the law or the white community and get kill. I was always to say yes ma'am, no ma'am to white people, because at any time they may get angry and maybe slap me because I was being sassy. So I was told. We were in a society where there were rules for white people and rules for black people, and black people had to stay in their place. And our parents tried to teach us a place to stay in to keep us from running into trouble with white people. When we would go into stores in the downtown area, passing through the stores, we were always told, don't ever have your hands in your pockets. Or when you go in the store, make sure you are going in there to buy something and have your money in your hand. And even if they would, some of the people in the stores would say that you did something or give you the wrong change, we were not to argue with them because we could get ourselves into trouble, and they didn't want us to get into trouble. So we were taught basically just stay away from white folks because that's trouble for you. Just stay away from them, you know. And so I would walk to school past the white school. The white school was about 4 blocks from my house. And I would walk all the way across town to the black school, and I would pass another elementary school on the way that I just walked right past.
Is that a white elementary school?
A white elementary school. But it never occurred to me to go there because I knew that that was a white school and that I was not supposed to be there. In our schools, we had books. Most of the books that we had in our schools had the names of white children in them, because what they would do in North Carolina, in Monroe, was when they would get new books for the white school, they would give us the old books. And so, you know, you had to write your name in a book when you got it so that you were responsible for that book for the rest of the year. So very seldom did we ever get a brand new book. We got used books all the time that had already been used by the white school. All our teachers were black, and they too tried to encourage us to stay in our places so that we didn't get in trouble with the white people, both going and coming to school, and so we abided by that because those were the rules that we were accustomed to. But then not all black folks felt like that. I found out later. Some, like we had a place and we had to stay in that place. Some black folks, like my husband's family, I later learned, were kind of radical, and they didn't think that we were inferior at all. Well, I don't suppose my parents thought that we were inferior, but they were not about to assert themselves in any way that will make white folks think that they felt they were equal either. But there were other people who said, oh, well, you know, yeah, we're just as good as anybody. And they didn't, I suppose they didn't teach the kids on the other kids, like my husband's family, they didn't teach them that you must be subservient. They never taught them to be subservient. And my parents taught me to be subservient to white folks. But when I met Robert, I found out that not all black folks were had that attitude of being subservient to white folks. And that was a struggle for me to recognize that that my so-called place was not just a colored place. It was that I had as much right to have a place in the world as any other human being. So then coming out of that environment and marrying Rob, and he's determined, he's been off to the Army and back, and he has encountered all kinds of discrimination in the Army, and discrimination was everywhere, and he was trying to get work and ran into all kinds of discrimination because of that. He was intellectually, I would say he was an intellectual superior to a whole lot of these people in Monroe. He wrote letters to the newspapers. He wrote poetry.
So at that age, he seems to have a very like fluid, kind of grasping kind of mind. Always
Yes,
wanting to learn.
yes. He read constantly. He was constantly. We had a library of books, and a lot of times when we had very little money, a part of that money was spent for buying another book, because he really had an inquiring mind and trying hard to understand what was going on. And I think Robert had a basic belief that once people got to know each other and accepted each other's our differences and our likenesses, and understanding that we were all human beings, he had a basic belief that people would come around and we could live in peace and harmony. He even thought that the government was going to come in on our side. From the time I married him until the time that we returned from China, I believe that he had a basic belief that there had to be good people in this government that were going to stand up for what was right, because he always wanted to stand up for the right thing, and he felt like other people were joining good people. You have to choose sides. There are forces out here that are forces for good, and there are forces out here for evil. And there comes a time in your life that you have to make a choice. And once you make that choice and you choose the side of good, then it just opens up a whole new world for you. You can be tolerant of people's prejudices because you understand that they're coming from, where they're coming from, that what made them that way. But then you can appeal to their better side and hope and pray that they will choose as well to support the good forces in this world and become a part of this big family that I feel those of us who have chosen the side of good are really a big family, and we are a world family, and there's no racism in that family. There are races in that family, and there are people who prefer to be with their people, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But there is a respect for each other and a respect for each other's beliefs, and so that came when he became president of the NAACP. I think that must have been around 56, sometime when all of the local professional people were experiencing a lot of problems if they belonged to the NAACP, or the white folks thought they belonged to the NAACP. There was a lot of economic pressures that were coming down. Teachers, just all of those people, the local white power structure was letting it be known that they were not going to tolerate having their Negroes being part of that, what they call that communist-backed NAACP. And so the professional people, and they were most of the people who belonged, black people, when Robert came back from the Army and he was elected, he went into the NAACP thinking that this is the organization now that's going to help to bring about all these changes, and the Supreme Court has made the decision and now everything's going to be just fine. And he went into the NAACP with that in mind. And most of those folks just either left, or when they joined, they would join under a pseudonym, an anonymous name, and don't tell anybody that I belong. Even a mother who was a teacher and her daughter was a teacher, the mother didn't know that the daughter was a member, and the daughter didn't know that the mother was a member, because they were afraid of the economic pressure, And I remember one black guy who was a janitor at one of the local places, and I don't remember what the place was, but he said that, and he had been a member of the NAACP for a long time, and he was sweeping around, and they were having a meeting, or he was in the room somehow, and he said he heard this, one of the fellas said, "I wouldn't have one of those nigga NAACP people working for me." And he had never spoken up, had the job for 20 or 30 years, had never said anything. And he said he threw his broom down and said, "Well, goddammit, you got one now." And he came and told Robert about it. And Robert said, no, that was the wrong thing for you to do. And he said, "Robert, I couldn't help it. I just was fed up."
That was it.
That was it. And after that, I just couldn't help it. He got fired, And I don't remember what happened after then, but every time Robert would enroll somebody else in the NAACP, he would warn them, "Don't tell anybody that you belong, especially the people that you work for. You can tell your other friends, but don't tell the people that you work for that you joined."
So all these people, the professional people, leave.
Yeah.
And Robert's left
With hardly anybody, and he just went and recruited among just ordinary common folks on the street. He liked to tell the fact that his first members came from the pool room. He went into a pool hall, and his mother had been a very deeply religious woman and had warned them. She was always afraid that her children would turn out to be gamblers or drunkards, and she would warn them to stay out of the pool hall because they gambled in the pool halls. And so Robert didn't even play pool. He didn't play any kind of cards, and he didn't hang around the pool halls and places, but he said that he was passing one day, and he said, "Well, I wonder if I can maybe get these fellas to join." He went in there and started talking to them. He said he wrote up his first members on the pool table.
That's great.
Yeah. So after this, that's right. And I think that may have been a part of the militancy of that. Not only did he write up regular people, street people, he wrote up maids and cooks. And so we knew what was going on in a lot of the houses of the white power structure, because they had maids and cooks in there who were members of the NAACP. They come back and tell us.
Your role in the Crusader.
Well, yeah, go right ahead. No, just go ahead. Besides writing a column, I had to do the corrections, the English and all of that on Robert's work, the editing of his work, and type up because we put it out on a mimeograph machine, I had to type up the stencils and then help to run them off, and so I was just a big part of it. Robert was mainly he was the brains and the editor, and I was proofreader and mechanics person to do.
You were a writer too.
Yeah.
What did you try to? What was the kind of how did you approach your column? What was it called?
Was mine Looking Back, I believe, or I think mine was Looking Back, and I talked about historical stuff, things that had happened. I talked about some of Rob's family history that we had found out about, some people that I had interviewed. We got news clippings from all over. People recognized that here is a protest newsletter, and they would send us stuff, and sometimes I would go through that and pull out things that were,
Wow.
good for our newsletter at the time. Had to find fillers, and so we'd have to go. We relied a lot on people like Nat Turner and those kinds of real revolutionary type people who were sincere about struggle and so forth. We talked about issues things that were going on in the community, and sometimes he would tell me, well, you write about that. We were a team, and we worked together as a team. During the height of the struggle for survival, when the Klan was threatening to wipe us all out, I organized the ladies, and we had a phone club so that when things were happening, I get on the phone and call some of the ladies, and then they get on the phone and call other people, and that way we were always aware of the movements that the Klan was getting ready to make on our community or some of our people. So we were active, but I was an active participant. It wasn't like I was just a housewife
Right.
at that time.
Well, can we
It was early on after Robert became the president of the NAACP, and he was becoming known in town as the president of the NAACP. Other people who were on jobs and who were members of the NAACP would tell us that, these folks are saying they're going to do this to you, they're going to do that to you, they're going to wipe out the family, they're going to kill Rob, and all that kind of stuff. And then we began to get telephone threats. And at that time, I started to realize that this is serious business. These folks mean business. They do mean to.
They would call and talk to Rob? Or?
They would call and talk to whomever answered the phone and threaten to do us harm. They would talk to the children, or Daddy John, or me, or whomever.
And they'd say, Rob keeps doing this.
Yep.
We're going to kill you.
We're going to blow up your house, and all that kind of stuff. So Daddy John, who was Rob's father, always kept a 12-gauge shotgun in his house at the door. And I remember he didn't always keep it at the door. He had one, and he kept it in his room, in his closet. But I remember one day when he pulled that 12-gauge shotgun out and said, we're going to keep this at the front door, because if the bastards come over here after us, we may have to use it.
And the Klan was fairly strong in Monroe.
Oh, yeah, the Klan was very strong. Klan was having rallies all over. Catfish Cole was on the rise. Catfish Cole was, he was having all kinds of rallies around Monroe. One rally, they reported that they had 5,000 people out at the rally. And Rob and Dr. Perry and a few of the other fellows went out to some of those Klan rallies and were there and on the scene. And I think it kind of unnerved the Klan people when they did. But that was what kind of brought on the rifle club. We organized a rifle club and got a charter through the American Rifle Association.
And what did the rifle club do?
We practiced shooting. We were all members. I was a member as well. We taught the kids how to shoot. We got our charter. We'd have our little meetings, and that was the backbone of our defense group.
And it was like an NRA type.
It was affiliated. It was a branch of the National Rifle Association.
White people.
I'm sure when we joined and the years after then, had they known we were a black group, they would have revoked our charter.
I think they would have too.
I'm sure they would have. But in the later years, when they were under such attack for guns, they came up with the fact that they were proud of the fact, well, if it hadn't been for guns in North Carolina, that man would have been dead, you know.
That's great.
If he hadn't been affiliated with the Rifle Association.
That's great.
And that's true. But the ironic part that I want people to know is that although we had an association with guns, we knew how to use guns. We trained other people how to use guns, our children included. We never had the occasion to have to shoot anybody. And that is, that's remarkable, because a lot of people, when they think about having guns, they think about killing folks. And Robert always, he was the ultimate teacher, always. And he always taught the other people and us that a gun is a weapon that can do terrible damage to people. And the only reason you would ever pick up a gun is for self-defense, and not for anything aggressive, or not to scare off anybody, and not to play with anybody. But it was a serious business when you really had to pick up a gun.
That's sort of a rhetorical question.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that, but why would it be considered? Why would it upset white Southerners so much for blacks to have a rifle club? Right to bear arms,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Why was that so upsetting in 1956 or 1959?
Because they knew that black people were at the point where they were demanding their equal rights, or they were at the point of requesting but actually struggling to get the equal rights. And they knew that if a large number of black people should take up arms, that they would either have to officially come down, and that it may lead to a civil war, and they didn't want that to happen. So they were going to do everything that they could. First of all, they didn't want to give in and give the rights up. But they knew much better than we did that all of that political power had to be backed up with, they were backing their political power up with guns. And the only thing was going to take it away from them or threaten it was the fact if black people took up guns too. So I think that was the reason they were so afraid, so they were going to nip that in the bud if they possibly could, and keep black people from even thinking about resorting to resistance, nothing aggressive, just resisting what they were doing, keeping that power through the gun that they had. They had control of the police department, of the state troopers, the National Guard, and they didn't intend to release that power, and they felt that that was a threat to the power.
you think that they were more threatened by those guns than by the nonviolent protests?
Oh, yes.
Including y'all's. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there was something about
That's
flashing
right.
guns.
That's right. That's right. They felt more threatened by that, because then that would mean that they would have to meet black men on an equal basis, because that gun would equalize you, you know, and they weren't ready to face that on an equal basis. No. So yes, they were much more threatened by that than they were by the nonviolent protests. I remember that as I told you before, I lived on Quality Hill across the railroad tracks from Newtown, where the larger black community lived. And I remember one of my neighbors drowned in a mud puddle, swimming out on Quality Hill. That same summer, 2 or 3 other young black boys had drowned in mud puddles, trying to learn how to swim or just going swimming. Hot down here.
Ponds.
Yeah, right. And so Robert had said, well, this is just outrageous. Said, we got this pool down here, and I don't know how he found out that the pool was built by the WPA with federal dollars. You got this pool down here supported by tax dollars, and it's restricted to white only. And he said, let's go before the city council and ask them for a day that they would set aside so that our black kids can swim. Now that was not to us, that was, hey, it wasn't revolutionary. It was just asking for one day. Or some
y'all
days.
Really not think of it though as was.
No. We just thought that, they could set aside a day. I think Robert thought that the city fathers would do that. When he went before them and presented that what about setting aside? I think at first they just said sometime so that the black kids could come in and swim. He really, at that time, I don't think he even thought that they would say no. But when they said no, they couldn't do that, because every time the black kids swam, they would have to drain the pool before the whites could use it again.
Did they explain that? Did they have any argument? Like what? This was just...
No, because black people had been in it. That was enough. At first, he didn't ask for a day. He asked, could you build a pool in our neighborhood? That's what they asked. Separate but equal, right?
Right.
Didn't even have to be equal. We're just asking for separate pool.
Right.
No, can't do that. City council, city recreation department, we can't do that. We don't have the money. Then they went back and asked, well, if you don't have the money to build a pool in our neighborhood, could you set aside some time when our kids can use the pool that you have? Because after all, it was built with federal funds, and it is tax supported by the recreation committee of the city. And after all, black people do pay taxes. And they couldn't do that. And that's when they brought up the fact that they'd have to drain the pool and wash it out every time. So Robert really got angry after they finally went and told them that no, there was no way, and there was nothing that they were going to do. They weren't going to even try to do anything to help relieve the situation. So he told them, said, well, If you want segregation, segregation is very expensive. And if you can't afford it, then you don't need it. And that's when he came back, and we started to organize demonstrations around the pool.
Okay, and what would they be? They would be
Our young people and Rob would get together, and they'd go down to the pool and picket around the pool.
with signs and everything?
With signs, yes, signs, and this pool built with federal funds. We have a right to swim. Open up the pool, let us swim once a week or whatever. I don't even remember all of the signs, and maybe the newspapers recorded. I'm sure they did
Did you
record
go down
some.
there some?
Oh yeah. But most of the time when I was there, I didn't picket. I was in the car with guns. But I was not picketing. But I was
Like a
always
quarter
there.
roll or something?
Yes. I was always there in the car. Not always, but part of the time I was there in the car. And each time that I was there in the car, there was a gun in the car with me. And
You were
just sitting there waiting, and,
in case the situation arose.
when we had to protect the kids and get them out of there. My younger son was, I think my older son was allowed to go down and picket with the kids as well. So, at that time, guns were legal as long as they were not concealed in North Carolina. So we had the guns on the seat. They were not concealed. Anybody walking up could see that the guns were there.
So back to the pool. So the protest goes on.
Yeah.
It goes on for a long time, or
Over a period of weeks, and maybe protest one day and then not go back for a week.
how did white people react to the pool?
At first, it was just a giggly kind of thing. The people would come out of the pool and look and laugh, but then the pool officials would get scared and close the pool, and then they would have to come out and leave. The protest at the pool went on off and on for a few days, but the more the protest went on, it wasn't the people at the pool so much who were getting stirred up, but it was people who wouldn't even have gone to the pool in the first place. That the Klan and I think the powers that be, the local authorities were stirring up to, they just intended to to kill Robert, really, and therefore try to kill the movement by killing him.
And a little statue of Robert, you have like up at the courthouse and a little Robert Williams Museum,
Oh,
Center for Tolerance or Struggle.
yes.
I haven't seen a lot of signs.
That
The Robert Williams Memorial.
Yeah.
Just yet.
Well, it doesn't have to be, it really doesn't have to be a Robert Williams Memorial. It doesn't have to be, but the seeds that he planted in my mind, in my family's mind, in a lot of people, I think those seeds have to be nourished, and hopefully eventually there will be some young white Monrovians
Right.
who will catch that seed, nurture that seed, and let it grow in Monroe. And then we can feel, I can feel better about Monroe. I haven't seen that yet, and I really hope and pray that it will come in my lifetime.
Yeah. I was going to get to this later, and we can go back.
Yes.
But that is something that interests me is how you think. I mean, looking back on everything that you and Robert too would want his legacy to be, y'all's legacy to be remembered. That and not both in Monroe but beyond too.
Yes, beyond Monroe.
Lots of images of kind of Robert and y'all that are, but people don't talk as much about kind of the meanings of of a life.
Mm-hmm. What did it all mean, and what was the struggle all about, and the fact that, you know, people like to blow up the fact that Robert was a violent man or believed in violence.
Right. He makes a great poster.
Yes.
Right, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm not against that.
Right. And that was a part of what happened. It wasn't that he was not a nonviolent person. Well, no, he was a nonviolent person. He didn't believe in doing violence himself to others other than in defense of his own. And I think that his stance on violent self-defense, let me put it that way, I think his stance on violent self-defense did more for the civil rights movement than people want to believe. Because once those evil people out there found that they couldn't do violence and be immune to violence, then they didn't do as much violence as they did when they knew they were doing it with immunity, and that nobody was going to prosecute them. So I think that part of Rob's stance in saying just this far and no further played a big role in letting not only the racist bigots in the local area know that they had to make changes, but let the power structure know that they had to really move to do some protection, or else the country would suffer for it and fall apart. Yeah, I think it affected the black community all over, because at last it made them see that, well, no, we don't need to accept this just lying down and doing nothing. You know, we need to stand up, and when we stand up and say no, we have a greater impact. If we look at, this is a story that Robert liked to tell all the time. You go by a school, and it's a Martin Luther King school, and a little black child says to his mother, "Mama, who was Martin Luther King?" The mother replies, "Martin Luther King was a civil rights man. He was a great leader of the black people. He loved his people, and he led them in a nonviolent struggle. And as a result of that, now we have integration and blah, blah, we." And he said, "Well, what happened to Martin Luther King?" "Well, he was killed." "Why was he killed?" "Well, he was killed because he loved his people and he struggled for his people, etc., etc." Okay, go down the road and here's a Medgar Evers University. Same scenario. "Well, Mama, who was Medgar Evers?" And when she explains who Medgar Evers was, "Well, what happened to him?" "Well, he was killed because he struggled for his people. He loved his people, and the racists killed him. They killed him." Malcolm X. "Well, Mama, this is Malcolm X Boulevard. Who is Malcolm X?" Same story. He loved his people, he struggled for his people, and he was killed. And the message that is given to young people, young black people, is if you love your people and you struggle to raise their level, you will be killed. So what young person is going to want to become a Malcolm X, a Martin Luther King, or Medgar Evers, or any of those martyrs that now we got, Martin Luther King holiday, you know? Who's going to want to pattern themselves after those people. Not anybody. No. And now you look out there, who's leading? Who's leading, you know? What kind of leadership do you have? Who wants to step in those footsteps? Nobody. But then you've got a Robert F. Williams who, as he liked to say, went home to Mount Vernon and lived out his days as a gentleman. Well, like the president went home to Mount Vernon and lived out his days as a gentleman.
Surrounded by his family.
Yes, surrounded by his family and loved ones, and so forth and so on. Had a long life, a long, fruitful life. Loved his people, struggled for his people, fought for his people, not only nationally, not only in North Carolina, not only in Monroe, let's say, not only in North Carolina, not only in the United States, but all over the world. Went all over the world and continued to struggle for his people, and then went home to become a gentleman farmer. You know. So, hey, maybe this is that's the kind of example that should be out there in front of not only black children, but white children as well. Hey, if you take the side of the people and you struggle for the best interests of the people and the side of good, and hook yourself to that star, then your life is worthwhile, and that's the legacy that I would like to see for the Robert F. Williams story. That's the legacy that I'd like to see.
And it goes way beyond. I mean, you're right. It goes way beyond like the gun thing.
Yes, way beyond that.
Because that. I mean, guns do capture a young person's imagination.
Yes.
In a way that having a milkshake poured on your head at a lunch counter does not.
Right, of course.
But it is something else. It's don't you think like that when when a child hears or about Robert standing up for himself that way, or any of the other people that you think of, Chamber or hell, people like George Washington. I mean, it's they're fighters, but it's not necessarily just that. It's not that they're that they're willing to use violence.
Yes.
But one sees something more behind that. And what do you think someone was going to see? What was behind the shotgun? What kind of what were people seeing in Robert?
I think they would see a person who really knows that one person can make a difference. One person standing up can definitely make a difference in not only his life, but in the lives of other people. And that one person, Rob believed that we all had that responsibility, that everybody's born for something. Everybody is here for a purpose.